Hello everyone, and welcome to this session for Adobe DITA World 2022, Ditch the Developer with native PDF publishing in Adobe Experience Manager. My name is Chad. I am a Senior Solutions Consultant with Adobe Technical Communications. You can contact me at the email address here you see on your screen and be happy to have a conversation with you around any of the features and things we're looking at here today, or anything really to do with structured content management. Maybe a little late to the game here to invite you to watch me present at Adobe DITA World 2022 since you're already doing so, but thank you for joining us in any event. So today I want to talk about PDF publication, how we've done that in the past, how we want to enable you to do that in the future with a low-code option that Adobe can provide. And so let's go ahead and get started. In the beginning, we used DITA OT, or DITA Open Toolkit, to publish our PDFs. And it was not so good, right? If you're familiar with the out-of-the-box DITA Open Toolkit PDF template, some of this next slide should look pretty familiar to you. So we had boring cover pages, right? Difficult to customize. Nothing very interesting to look at here. I often liken it to walking down the generic aisle at the grocery store. We had unwanted white space. So we, if we're publishing a book map in DITA OT, what we're going to see is, if I have an empty chapter topic, for example, I'm going to have this kind of unwanted, sort of weird looking white space. So I like the little chapter table of contents there, but certainly there's room for improvement, and also changing this layout in the default DITA OT template is somewhat challenging. We also had some pretty uninspiring page layouts, right? So you can see just an example of that here, where it gets the job done, but there's nothing particularly interesting about it. So we had a tool available, DITA Open Toolkit, that is sort of the standard for the starting point, at least for your PDF publication from DITA content, right? And all of this, is something that nearly every organization needs to customize, right? You want to have your branding reflected here within the environment. You want to have some color, right? There's not a lot of color in here unless I inject some images into the content and so forth, right? So we really need to think about this as a starting point, right? And then once we get into the business of customizing this, that becomes very difficult, right? So it's very, very hard to customize this this out-of-the-box PDF template using DITA Open Toolkit. It requires coding your layouts and different things in a fairly esoteric language called XSLFO. Combine that with XSLT, and I still got a couple of books on my shelf from when I was learning to do this. My first DITA project involved developing a custom PDF plugin for the organization I worked for at the time. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like, right? It requires that coding in XSLFO, right? There's a lot of coding, right? You can see on the left side of this image, we've got some line numbers. There are many, many lines of code that go into generating that PDF from DITA content using the DITA Open Toolkit. And the thing about XSLT and XSLFO is they're fairly esoteric, right? So I had to teach myself those languages, do a lot of trial and error in order to get the results I was looking for. And it's a lot of work It's a lot of learning things that you aren't going to need really in any other context, and it's just sort of slow and painful, right? And so the DITA Open Toolkit is free, as in free beer, right? And that's great, right? We love open source tools. We love the kind of power it gives us to enable PDF generation, right? But that comes with a cost, and that cost can be expressed in a number of ways, right? It can be a financial cost in the form of hiring a consultant to do this work for you. It can come in the form of time, in the form of learning those languages I just mentioned, XSLT, XSLFO. And there's a lot of coding, there's a lot of iteration, there's a lot of trial and error. And at the end, result is almost always a compromise, right? There are some limitations to the DITA Open Toolkit with regards to what you can reasonably expect to achieve in terms of page layouts and things like that, right? Now, that's one option, right? But there are, of course, others, as if you've worked in this field for any length of time, you're probably aware, right? So there are third-party PDF formatters that typically run as plugins for the DITA Open Toolkit. So that's another option to give you some more powerful controls over your page layouts and other types of design elements, right? And of course, because we're Adobe, we of course love Adobe Framemaker, which provides a template-based, sort of a GUI-based tool to allow you to design these page layouts and get that print quality PDF that a lot of organizations need, right? But still, um, there are some asterisks, right, to mention there, right? So in any case, right, they still require some specialized skills, right? You're not going to have an XSLFO developer on staff typically. I mean, it's not always the case, but it's not certainly somebody that you would typically have, particularly in a technical writing department. So there's even with the third-party formatters, right? There are requirements to code in XSLT and XSLFO. Really dig into those very, very cumbersome and heavy style sheets that are a part of not only DITA Open Toolkit, but also that are added on by some of these third-party formatters. If you want to go the Framemaker route, it's really great if you have some experience working with the templates and the templating system that's available within Framemaker. It's very powerful, right? But it's also got a learning curve associated with it. So it's very difficult to get up and running quickly. And typically, we would recommend hiring a consultant or a partner or a developer to actually do that work for you, right? So a lot of times it's been worked on in as sort of the first phase of the project, right? We're going to solidify and finalize our PDF design, the look and feel of that PDF. But then anytime you're looking to change that, maybe your company goes through a rebrand, right? So you shouldn't have to hire that developer again, go back to that well, spend more money, more time, however you want to measure it. You shouldn't have to hire that developer to do things like changing the logo, right? Maybe our company's gone through a rebrand activity, right? We need to swap out our logo and republish everything using that new branding. We shouldn't need to get a developer involved to make that happen. We shouldn't need a developer to add metadata from our DITA map, for example, to the header and footer of our document or to the cover page. That should be something that we can accomplish ourselves in just a few clicks, right? So we want to make that really easy for you. If I want to add a new note style or heaven forbid, add an output class to an existing DITA element and then create a style associated with that in our PDF, right? We shouldn't have to hire a developer or spend money and a lot of effort and time to make that happen, right? We have a lot to do as technical communicators. There's a lot on our plates, right? We don't have time to go ahead and learn how to do all of these things ourselves or go out and source a consultant to do the work for us, right? All of those sorts of things should be ideally self-service, right? Using your existing kind of skill set and expertise that you have in-house, and be able to really, in an agile way, update the look and feel of our PDF documents in more or less real time, right? we shouldn't have to we shouldn't have to have separate templates for adding watermarks or have parameters that we need to remember the syntax for to pass to the publishing job to add simple things like a watermark, right? All of this stuff is really common requirements for many, and I would dare to say all technical documentation team, particularly those who still have that hard requirement to generate a PDF that meets all of their branding guidelines, and also is easy to maintain and customize going forward. And sort of one more thing about that, right? I talked about DITA Open Toolkit and those third-party formatters, and even though we love it, Framemaker as well, right? All of these options are pretty heavy. And so if I'm generating a long PDF, say 500 pages or so, and particularly if that PDF has a lot of large tables in it, those can be very processing intensive, but those are Java-based jobs. We have to spin up a Java virtual machine, run that code within that virtual machine. It's a pretty heavy option. So it increases load on the server our component content management system is running on, impacts potentially performance for other users, and also, by the way, because it's heavy and because we have to spin up those virtual machines and all of those other things, all of these options tend to be a bit slow, right? So when we think about all of the time that we might be spending today waiting for a PDF to render, regardless of how we might be doing that, right? We really want to take some of that friction out of the process and be able to generate our PDF and move on with our day, rather than waiting and waiting and waiting for that document to be generated for us. And oh, by the way, did I mention all of the coding that would be required in order to actually facilitate any modifications to that template, right? We talked about this already. The idea of swapping out a logo, changing header colors to reflect your new company branding guidelines, whatever the case might be. Even something as simple as defining a new font, right? That can be very, very coding intensive when we start thinking about using our free open source option into the Open Toolkit, and even some of the others in terms of the third-party PDF formatters and so forth, right? So to all of this, everything we just talked about, right? To all of this, Adobe says, let there be light. Lightweight PDF design and publishing, that is. So one of the things that Adobe has been working on lately and is really pleased to be able to reveal here today in the context of our annual virtual DITA World 2022 conference is the native PDF publishing feature that is now available with XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. And what we're going to do with this new capability of XML documentation is going to be really enable you to do all of the things that a developer used to have to do, right? So we want to provide you with low code and no code options for customizing your PDF all within the browser, right? So we're going to use common web-based languages, common web technologies in order to design and customize our PDF output going forward using this new publishing option available from Adobe. We're going to use HTML. We're going to use CSS, very commonly used web technologies, right? In fact, the backbone of the web. And a lot of organizations have a lot of people who have skills in these areas and can go ahead and contribute their design and expertise to a PDF output very simply within the browser. So we want to enable you to really easily customize your cover pages, add your logo, add a custom background image, add all of these things that make up a useful and visually appealing cover page, because that's one of the things that was absolutely missing from that DITA Open Toolkit PDF that we saw earlier, right? It wasn't colorful, it was black and white. Here we can really easily add a splash of color here, a logo there. You can see a watermark, all of the metadata that we have also present on the cover page here. We can do that with a few clicks within the browser rather than going into the XSLFO and ultimately testing that code out in a fairly heavy manner, right? So we want to design custom page layouts, add those watermarks really easily as just a toggle to turn on when I'm publishing, right? Is this a draft version? Let's turn on that watermark and we'll go ahead and just publish it and move on with our day, right? We don't need to have multiple transformation types to facilitate that. We don't need to have parameters that we can't remember the syntax for to pass to our publishing engine in order to get a seemingly simple thing like a watermark, right? And we want to enable you to do all of this from the browser, right? So you can see here, and we'll take a hands-on look here in a moment at how we can actually facilitate all of this directly from the authoring environment provided by XML Documentation for Adobe Experience Manager, right? So we're going to have page layouts that we can modify as we see fit. We're going to have style sheets that define the way notes look and bullets look and all of those things, right? We're going to have this no code option of doing it all with the options you see on the right-hand side of this screenshot, and certainly also more powerful capabilities to work within the source view of the HTML, work natively in the CSS if we're a little bit more advanced with our capabilities there, and ultimately be able to design a beautiful, very nicely branded, easy to customize PDF document, all from within your browser, all from within the environment you would be using to actually author the content itself. And so with all of that, it is now time for our demo. So let's go ahead and take a look at this new publishing option that we can provide as part of XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. So as I mentioned, right, all of this work can be done from within our authoring environment that we call XML Editor. This is a web-based tool, if you haven't seen it or worked with it before, that really is, as we move forward, becoming more and more of an integrated development environment, or IDE, for your structured DITA XML content. Right? So we've got our cryptozoological field guide up on the screen, and this is our authoring environment. Right? So I can go ahead and make changes here. You can add content. This is where we can do our authoring and ultimately content management, version control, things like that. Right, so we can go ahead and check that in, and we have now a new version of the content. So all of this is really just to show you that we have an authoring environment to which we have added a PDF design and publishing environment as well. So looking to bring everything within a single unified interface so that you don't have to use a wide range of tools to accomplish the goals that you have in terms of publishing, authoring, managing content, or any of those other things that we need to do in the context of a CCMS. right? So this is the document we'll be looking to publish. This is again, our cryptozoological field guide. And let's take a look at some of the options we have for customizing our out-of-the-box template that we provide. And that's all going to happen here under our Output tab. So if I click there, I'm going to be brought to sort of a order and hierarchy here of our page layouts, different style sheets that might come into play. I've got resources that I've added in terms of different logos or icons that I might want to use within my output, right? So we're just going to walk through this and explore a little bit about what a preset looks like, how to change and design things like our front cover, work with the CSS to style various DITA elements, and so forth. Right. So when I open up my preset, I'm going to see a number of options. Right? We can choose the file name that we want to use. We can apply, of course, conditions using either a DITA val or what we call in our solution a condition preset. We can use baselines for managing different releases of a document that correspond with product releases and so forth. Right? Under the Layout tab, I'm going to have the ability to define a specific template that I want to use. And out of the box, we provide one called Basic, which we're not going to look at too much today, and one called Advanced that's going to have more page layouts available and a little bit more control and options in terms of what we want to do there. We can also very easily set up security for our published PDF document. So I can set a password or restrict the document in certain ways, right? We can change the password. We can allow people to print or not, copying or not, etc. Right? So there's a lot of options that we can set here. And then under the advanced tabs, we can do things to enhance accessibility, which is what we call a tagged PDF. Embed fonts so that the reader does not need them available on their system if we're using our own custom fonts that we don't want to license for everybody, right? We can do some very sophisticated manipulation of the content using JavaScript. We're not going to delve into that much today. And we can do things like compression, watermarking, which will actually, let's set that up now since we're here. I'm just going to add my draft watermark in. And then we can also set the PDF to comply with various standards that might exist. So standard PDF, PDF-A, and so forth. Right? So those are some of the options we get when we think about the preset itself. And as part of the preset, when we went and defined that PDF template that we used, right? If I go back here, I can see I do have access to my advanced and basic, and you can make as many of these as you like, but we just have 2 to work with today. And if I delve into them, we'll see that I do have layouts for various types of pages, including front and back cover, chapter cover pages, first, left, and right versions of those if I want to apply that there. A common page, which is going to be just kind of a standard page, and then of course things like front matter pages, glossary, index, other things like that, table of contents, landscape layouts, and so forth. Right. So if I want to take a look at, and we had a little preview of this previously when I showed you the screenshots of the PDF we'll be publishing today. Here's what it looks like to actually work on my cover page, my front cover layout for this document, right? And what we can do is really easily insert fields, think about them as variables, and those can be tied to information that exists within your DITA maps or your book maps. In this case, we're publishing a book map. So let's add a new field to our cover page. You can see I've already applied a background image and my logo. Let's add a field, and I can do that right from here. And then I can choose, so do I want a date, a specific time, anything, if I want to have my page count, chapter titles, and those would usually show up in things like page headings and things like their headers rather, and things like that. But I can also choose to define metadata, and this is going to use an XPath expression that is then going to pull the information from your book map, in this case, and inject it onto the page. So I might want to use, and I've created already, this short description one. I can have my copyright information, publisher, really any information that exists within that map. I can, as long as I can write an XPath expression for it, insert it onto my cover page with just a few clicks, or into my header or footer, onto my back cover, whatever the case may be, right? So in my case, I'm just going to go ahead and insert my short description there. And you can see it came through in this kind of wildly large font. So let's go ahead and adjust that. And this is where a lot of the power of this comes in, right? If I wanted to adjust the size of a font in DITA Open Toolkit, then I've got to dig into my style sheets and go ahead and try that out, do some coding. In our case, right, I just want to set a font size. So let's use our sans serif font just as a default. Let's leave it as standard weight, and then let's give it a size. So I'm just going to go look how tiny it got, so I can kind of size that up as we go. So maybe my short description should be a little bit smaller than my title here. And let's also give it a font color. So let's make that a beautiful shade of green. I don't know how well that will go with our overall design here, but you can see I can choose really any color that I need, either by clicking in the areas here, defining the numbers manually, and I can choose different methods of defining those colors as well, right? So pretty easy to go ahead with. No coding yet, right? You can see it's this kind of vibrant shade of green, and we defined the font size, the color. We inserted the reference to that document property that's embedded in the prologue of our book map. So that's just sort of an example of some of the things that you can do in terms of laying out with no code at all, right? Aside from knowing the XPath expression, which isn't too bad. Now, I can also, if I want to, because this is all based just on HTML and CSS, right? I can also go into the source mode and work with the HTML directly. So if I want to code in some things that are not possible through the UI, right? If you want to get very sophisticated with rounded edges around your borders of things, or whatever the case might be, we can go ahead and apply that CSS here, either by directly embedding the styles within the HTML itself, or we can also do that by reference, of course, using an external CSS. So we've got access to the code. We don't have to touch it if we don't want to, but all of those options are available, and it can become quite powerful quite quickly. So let's go ahead and save that. And then another thing I want to show you is the ability to manage the CSS here, much in the same way, right? Just like we worked with before, we do have the ability to choose various font families, etc. Now for these are actually note styles that I've got configured here, so you can see what my note would look like, and I've got an icon that I've defined for that. And much the same way, I've done that for the other DITA note types that are available here as well, right? So my fast path has a nice little rabbit icon. My notice is going to have an exclamation point, and so on, right? So quite a bit of powerful capability here when we think about how we want to design various elements that are going to appear in that PDF output. And maybe I've decided, I think we had a warning in our topic on the Yeti that we looked at briefly earlier. And so maybe I decide orange is not the right color for me, right? So I can open up my background options here, right? I can obviously define things like image paths, You know, I want to have perhaps a border, um, other things like pagination. I can have a break after. So if you really want to have some control over page breaks, we have some options to handle that here within the CSS. And also, obviously, within the UI, right? I don't have to code any CSS to do these things. But let's just, as an option here, go ahead and choose a new background color for our warning note type, and let's make that this kind of blue color with that. I've also defined, of course, this border here on the left. So I've got this left border that's going to be orange, right? So I could have modified that as well. Maybe I want to have a top border here as well, or anything of that nature is certainly possible. So we have a solid border. Now I've got a top and a right. Um, and then we can maybe go all the way around it if we really want to call attention to that. So no coding required, just selecting options here from within our UI. Right. Likewise, I can do the same thing for other types of elements that might appear. Right. So I might have a heading style, and we might want to define those here as well. So if I've got a chapter heading, I might want that to jump over to the right side of the page with this nice border, or perhaps maybe I find this font to be a bit large, and maybe I want to shrink that down a little bit. Let's make that 28 instead. That gives us a unwrapped bit of text there as our chapter heading. So I can also, much like I did with the CSS, I can go in here and ultimately take a look at the source. I can see that my H1, H2, and so forth are all defined here. And we can go ahead and either use the UI to go ahead and define the styles here. You can see those note styles that I was working with before. I can choose, set up a background image for them. That's where those icons were coming from, etc. And really easily modify those things using, again, common web technologies like HTML and CSS, as opposed to the more esoteric options that are available from DITA Open Toolkit, right? Digging into all of that code, learning new skills that aren't going to have a lot of value outside of modifying that PDF. So we do have this blue theme here, but we also took a look at, we have a simple theme, right? So let's publish a simple PDF first, and let's call this simple theme. Yeah, let's just leave it like that. Simple theme, and crypto is just the name of my map. Again, I have the same options available here. I could choose where I want to publish it to. If there's a specific location in my DAM where that needs to go in order to be surfaced on a given page, etc., we can choose the output path for this. Again, apply those conditions, define file names. I'm going to use my basic layout for this particular simple theme PDF. And we have the same options in terms of security and some of these advanced things. We're not going to use a watermark for this one. So let's go ahead and publish that and see what it looks like. This is going to be our simple theme, not going to have that nice cover page that we were looking at just a moment ago. It's just going to be fairly straightforward and a really lightly designed starting point for you to come in and use some of the tools we just looked at in order to customize the look and feel of your PDF output. So let's download that, and you can see actually doesn't look that different from some of those screenshots I showed of the DITA Open Toolkit before as a starting point, right? So we can see we've got our aquatic cryptids chapter here rather, which includes things like champ and of course the kraken and other lake monsters, etc. And then all of our land cryptids are in chapter 2. So you get a nice, very simple PDF out of the box, right? And then we can go ahead and customize that using the tools we were just looking at. So that's the basic option. It's a good starting point. but there's certainly nothing super exciting about that out of the box, other than it was fast. You might have noticed how quickly that happened. Nothing up my sleeve here. I didn't pause the recording or anything while that happened, so it's nice and fast. We're going to generate these PDFs in a fraction of the time you may be accustomed to using those heavier PDF rendering options that we discussed a little bit earlier. So let's close out of our simple theme. And then with our blue theme, recall, we did set that watermark, right? We changed the look and feel of that warning, which is present here, right? About approaching the wild Yeti. Shouldn't do that. They're very dangerous if you can find one. So we changed the look and feel of that. It's no longer to be this kind of, I don't know, orangish background. It's now going to be that blue background we selected before. And I can toggle between authoring and output here, all within the same environment. So I don't need to jump to any additional tools to go ahead and design and publish my PDF. So let's go ahead and generate that blue theme PDF that we've been working on together here over the past 15 minutes or so. And I'm just going to go ahead and click again, and that's going to generate. Notice how quickly it's going, and I'm talking the whole time. So again, nothing up my sleeve. There are no smoke and mirrors involved here. We generated that PDF very quickly. Of course, this is a smallish one. Larger ones might take a little bit longer, but it should be, again, significantly more performant than some of the options you might be aware of today. So I'm just going to open up my PDF again, and let's download that, and we'll see what that looks like. So again, we have our cryptozoology field guide. We've got our nice background image here with this sort of blue whoosh of color. The Adobe logo, obviously our title on the cover page is an important aspect of that. There's our watermark. You can see the green kind of subtitle here, the Adobe Data World 2022 edition of the Cryptozoology Field Guide, which is, I'm sad to say, not all that different from any previous versions that any of you who have seen some of my other presentations might have seen. But we can get this really nice result without doing a lot of custom coding. So there's our nice kind of chapter page with the right justified title here for our chapter, and then a little more white space between lines that we saw in that simpler or basic PDF option. And then we can go ahead and scroll through and learn again about our friend Champ and perhaps some of the other monsters that may exist in your neck of the woods. So the chupacabra, the Sasquatch, etc. Not included in this guide is the hodag, which is native to my home state of Wisconsin, up in the Rhinelander area, which is about in the middle of the state. We'll have to get that added pretty soon. And there is, of course, our warning that we customized together as well, with the kind of obnoxious orange box around it and the blue background. So I'm not expecting a lot of you to reach out to me to help design your PDFs. Design is not really my thing, but I can go ahead and make certain that it would be very ugly if you chose to work with me to do that. I got the nice orange and blue contrast there, which is probably hurting your eyeballs at the moment. So that's really the end of the demo I wanted to do. We're really excited to unleash this feature on the world and really empower all of our customers to start creating their own custom PDF layouts, create those new looks and feels, swap out that logo, add that watermark just with a couple of clicks, really taking a lot of the friction out of the process of customizing those PDFs that we still need to deliver in a lot of cases to our customers, right? Or at least we want to be able to provide that as an option. So I really do want to thank you, not only for attending my session today, but also for attending a lot of the other wonderful sessions that I know we have planned for you to enjoy as part of DITA World 2022. Any questions that you may have, again, please do feel free to pop those into the chat. I'll be online during the session, and so we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And then if you do want to reach out to us, you can find me at dybdahl@adobe.com and also techcom@adobe.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you around your PDF and other types of needs that you may have with regards to your documentation. Have a great day. I've been Chad. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everyone, and thank you very much.